Did you know that a man once hijacked a passenger plane in broad daylight? Stole $200,000 in ransom money, parachuted out midair, and was never seen again? No body was found. No parachute. Not even a real name. What started as a routine flight turned into one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. The man called himself Dan Cooper, but the world would come to know him as D.B. Cooper. It was the evening of November 24th, 1971, the night before Thanksgiving. A man in a black suit, tie, raincoat, and sunglasses walked calmly into Portland International Airport. He looked like a businessman, carried no luggage, paid in cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle. He gave his name as Dan Cooper. The flight was short, just 30 minutes. The aircraft was a Boeing 727, with 36 passengers and 6 crew members. Once the flight was in the air, Cooper handed a small note to a flight attendant. At first, she didn't even read it, assuming it was just a phone number. But Cooper leaned slightly toward her and quietly said, "Miss, you better read that. I have a bomb." The note explained that he was carrying explosives and wanted her to sit beside him. When she did, he opened his briefcase and showed her what appeared to be red cylinders connected by wires. Whether it was real or not didn't matter. The threat was convincing. His instructions were precise. He wanted $200,000 in $20 bills, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck standing by when the plane landed. He made it clear, if the demands weren't met, he would destroy the plane. The airline agreed. The plane circled the skies for nearly 2 hours, while authorities scrambled to gather the ransom and parachutes. Cooper sat calmly, drinking bourbon and smoking cigarettes, speaking politely to the crew. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't angry. He was in control. When the plane finally landed in Seattle, the money and parachutes were delivered. Cooper let all the passengers go unharmed, but he stayed on board with the crew. He then gave a new set of instructions. The pilots were told to fly south toward Mexico at a low altitude of 10,000 feet, with the landing gear down and the cabin depressurized. These were unusual demands, clearly designed for one thing: a jump. About 45 minutes into the flight, something strange happened. A warning light in the cockpit indicated that the rear staircase, located beneath the tail of the plane, had been opened. Moments later, the cabin shifted. Somewhere over the dark, cold forests of southwestern Washington, in stormy weather and near freezing temperatures, D.B. Cooper leapt into the night. No one saw him jump. There was no radar, no spotlight, no tracking system, just thick clouds and total darkness. The plane landed safely in Reno, but Cooper was gone. So was the money. What followed was one of the most intense manhunts in U.S. history. The FBI launched Operation Norjack, Northwest Hijacking. Military aircraft scoured the forests. Helicopters swept across rivers and ridges. Teams searched the suspected drop zone for months, but there was nothing. No footprints, no parachute, no broken branches. It was as if the man had simply vanished into thin air. For years, investigators chased down hundreds of leads. Some believed Cooper had died during the fall. The terrain was brutal, the weather unforgiving, and he was wearing only a suit and loafers. Others were convinced he had survived and pulled off the perfect crime. Theories spread quickly. Maybe he was ex-military. Maybe he had help on the ground. Maybe he was already living under a new name, watching the investigation unfold from a quiet distance. Then, in 1980, nearly a decade after the hijacking, a young boy vacationing with his family near the Columbia River stumbled upon something buried in the sand. It was 3 bundles of old $20 bills, faded and decaying. When the FBI examined them, the serial numbers were an exact match, part of the ransom money given to D.B. Cooper. But the location didn't make sense. The rest of the money was never found. Neither was Cooper. Over the years, more than 800 suspects were investigated. One of them, Richard Floyd McCoy, hijacked a plane in a similar fashion just months after Cooper's escape. He was arrested, escaped prison, and was later killed in a shootout with police. But even then, the FBI couldn't prove he was D.B. Cooper. Others claimed to know him. Some even confessed. But no confession ever held up under scrutiny. There was never enough evidence to charge anyone. In 2016, after more than 4 decades of dead ends, the FBI officially closed the case. They had exhausted every lead, but the mystery refused to die. D.B. Cooper had become a folk legend, a symbol of escape, rebellion, and the unknown. To this day, no one knows who he was, where he landed, or if he survived. All we know is that on one stormy night, a man with a briefcase full of cash disappeared into the sky and left behind a mystery that still haunts America. Did you know 3 prisoners escaped from Alcatraz in 1962, the most secure prison in American history? Alcatraz wasn't just any prison. It was a cold, brutal rock in the middle of the San Francisco Bay, surrounded by freezing, violent waters, patrolled by guards with rifles and shoot-on-sight orders. But on one stormy night, while lightning cracked above the sea, 3 men vanished from their locked cells, left behind dummies in their beds, and escaped the island without a single soul hearing them. No alarms, no footprints, no bodies. The FBI said they drowned. But years later, a letter arrived. It was signed by one of the escapees, and it changed everything. It began with a plan, months in the making. The 3 men, Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin, weren't just prisoners. They were thinkers, and most importantly, they were silent. By day, they were model inmates, quiet, obedient, never causing trouble. By night, they were digging, planning, building. Using spoons stolen from the kitchen, they chiseled away at the air vents in the back of their cells. For weeks, the scraping was masked by music played during lights out. They covered the holes with cardboard and paint, matching the cell walls perfectly. Behind those vents was a utility corridor, unmonitored, dusty, and hidden in plain sight. They stole over 50 raincoats and stitched them together into a makeshift life raft. They made paddles from stolen wood, even created dummy heads from plaster toilet paper and real human hair, taken from the prison barbershop. On the night of June 11, 1962, the island was wrapped in fog. Waves crashed violently against the rock. Thunder rolled in the distance. And inside Alcatraz, 3 prisoners made their move. Frank Morris was the first to act. He removed the fake grill covering the hole behind his cell. He crawled in, slowly, into a pitch-black shaft no wider than his shoulders. Dust, cobwebs, silence. One wrong move, one loud scrape, and the whole plan would collapse. Behind him, the Anglin brothers did the same. Each slipped through the wall one by one into the narrow maintenance corridor. They met behind the cell block, breathing hard, silent, listening. Above them, the roof. They scaled a vertical plumbing pipe, thick with rust and slippery from rain. Their hands bled, their feet slipped, but they climbed. Reaching the rooftop, they stayed low. Spotlights scanned the prison yard in slow, rhythmic arcs. Guards were posted in towers. One step into the light and it was over. They crawled, inch by inch, across the rain-slick roof, toward a drain pipe, then down. 50 feet. One slip meant death. Once on the ground, they crossed a blind spot they had mapped for weeks. They reached the outer fence, already loosened in secret. It bent just enough for them to squeeze through. At the island's northern shore, they hid behind rocks cloaked in fog. And there, under total darkness, they unpacked their homemade raft, made of over 50 raincoats, stitched, sealed, and tested in secret. They inflated it using an accordion-like instrument fashioned from a stolen concertina. Time was running out. The tide was turning. They pushed off into the black, icy water, armed only with wooden paddles and raw determination. The water was near freezing. The currents unpredictable and vicious. Sharks were known to circle the bay, and the fog made it impossible to see the city lights on the horizon. But they rowed, in silence, each stroke pulling them away from the prison and deeper into legend. They were never seen again. By morning, guards discovered the empty cell and the dummy heads on the pillows. A full manhunt began instantly. Boats, planes, divers. The FBI launched a massive investigation. Official reports said the raft likely sank, that the men drowned in the freezing water, that no one could have survived the currents. But then strange things started to surface. Weeks later, a paddle was found on Angel Island, just north of Alcatraz, a plastic-wrapped wallet belonging to Clarence Anglin, washed up on a nearby beach. Inside, family photos, numbers, receipts. In 1979, the FBI closed the case, saying the men were most likely dead. But most likely isn't the same as for sure. Years passed. In 2013, the FBI received a letter, handwritten, shaky. It said, "My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in 1962 with my brother Clarence and Frank Morris. I'm 83 years old and in bad shape. I have cancer. If you promise I won't go to jail again, I'll tell you exactly where I am." The letter included details never released to the public, things only someone involved would know. The FBI tested it, handwriting, DNA, but results were inconclusive. The letter was quietly shelved. So what really happened? Did the men survive? Did they start new lives in South America? Did someone help them escape, maybe even from the inside? Or did they vanish into the sea, leaving behind only a legend? The mystery remains. The evidence is thin, but one thing is certain. No one ever escaped from Alcatraz, until 3 men did, and no one ever found them. Did you know a 10-year-old girl vanished without a trace? No witnesses, no footprints, nothing. 3 years later, she returned on her own, at 3 a.m. and wearing the same clothes she disappeared in. She didn't speak, didn't cry, just stared. Authorities placed her under 24-hour police surveillance, but exactly 1 year later, from a locked room, under full security, she vanished again, without a sound, without a struggle, and without a single clue how she escaped. Only one thing was left behind. A note in her own handwriting. "I wasn't supposed to come back." This is the unsolved case of Emily Trent. And what happened to her still haunts her town to this day. She was just 10 when she vanished while walking home from school. It was a quiet town in Vermont. A small wooded path connected the school to her street. Emily walked it every day, but on April 4th, 2006, she never made it home. At first, everyone thought she'd gotten lost. But when search teams arrived, things got strange. There were no signs of a struggle. No broken branches, no discarded belongings, not a single footprint. It was as if she had stepped off the path and vanished into thin air. The investigation went on for months. Police dogs couldn't pick up a scent. CCTV showed nothing. No ransom was demanded. Eventually, the town held a funeral, with an empty coffin. Her parents were devastated. But then, everything changed. Exactly 3 years later, on April 4th, 2009, the doorbell rang. It was 3:02 a.m. Her mother opened the door and dropped to the floor. There stood Emily, alive, unharmed, wearing the exact same clothes she was last seen in. The shoes, the backpack, even the tiny scratch on her cheek untouched by time. She looked exactly 10 years old. When her parents tried to speak to her, she said nothing. Not a word, not a reaction. Her eyes were open. But it felt like she wasn't there. Doctors ran tests. Physically, she was perfectly healthy. No malnutrition, no injuries, no trauma. But emotionally, she was distant, disconnected. Like her mind had never grown. She didn't respond to her name. Didn't recognize her home. Didn't recognize her own face in the mirror. The only word she spoke, after 4 months of silence, was during a therapy session. She looked at the ceiling and whispered, "I wasn't supposed to come back." After that, she went silent again. The FBI got involved. Her case became federal. They placed her under strict 24-hour surveillance. Multiple cameras in her room, officers outside the house. Her door was locked from the outside at night. She was never left alone. But on April 4th, 2010, exactly 1 year later, she vanished again. She was last seen at 9:42 p.m. lying in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. At 10:06 p.m., for reasons still unknown, all 6 cameras in the house glitched for exactly 6 seconds. When the footage returned, Emily was gone. No signs of forced entry. No windows broken. No doors opened. The officers outside hadn't moved. The hallway camera showed no one entering or exiting. It was impossible. And yet, she was gone. All that remained was a single piece of paper on her pillow. In her own handwriting, "I told you I wasn't supposed to come back." The story sent shockwaves across the country. Media called it a hoax, a cover-up, a psychological breakdown. But no evidence has ever been found. No suspects. No theories that truly make sense. Some believe she was taken by a cult. Others think she was part of a government experiment. A few even believe she was never human to begin with. In 2017, a hiker found something buried beneath a pile of stones deep in the forest. It was an old children's book, water-damaged and torn. On the inside cover, written in faint pencil, were the words, "Still not supposed to be here." To this day, Emily Trent has never been found. Not a single confirmed sighting. Not a single clue. Some say she was taken. Others say she was returned to wherever she came from. But one thing is certain. She came back once, but she was never meant to stay. This is Mystery Note. If you want more real stories that bend reality and chill the spine, hit subscribe and ask yourself, where did Emily really go? Did you know a 12-year-old boy once walked into a thunderstorm, just 6 blocks from his home, and vanished right in the middle of a populated street? It didn't happen at night. It didn't happen in the woods. It happened in broad daylight with people all around, just minutes from his front door. His name was Isaac Holloway. Quiet, smart, lived with his mother in a peaceful town in North Dakota. On August 14, 2003, around 2:30 p.m., Isaac stepped outside to return a library book. The sky was turning gray, wind starting to pick up. Thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. He told his mom, "I'll be back before it rains." He never came back. He wore a gray hoodie, black jeans, and carried a library book called The Time Thief. The route to the library was simple: 6 blocks of sidewalk, a few houses, a greenhouse at the curve, and the town's old gas station across the block. At least 5 people saw him that afternoon, walking alone, hoodie up, head down, rain beginning to fall. One woman even waved to him. And then, near the corner of Miller Street, where the sidewalk curves behind the abandoned greenhouse, he disappeared. No one saw anyone approach him, no cars, no struggle, no scream. Just one moment he was there, and the next he wasn't. His mother called the neighbors, then the police. Within an hour, a full search was underway. Over 100 volunteers combed the entire neighborhood. Dogs, drones, and even helicopters were brought in by nightfall. They found no signs of Isaac, no torn clothes, no dropped book, nothing. Even stranger, his wet footprints tracked by search teams just stopped. Right in the middle of the sidewalk. No turn, no detour. One step was there and the next one never came. They searched drains, rooftops, backyards. Every attic and shed in the area was opened. Nothing. No trace, no direction, no exit. The next day, detectives pulled camera footage from a gas station across the block. At exactly 2:43 p.m., the video shows Isaac walking along the road. Everything is normal at first, but then he begins to flicker. His figure slightly distorts like heat waves rippling off pavement. His body blurs, edges fade. Frame by frame, his shape becomes less visible, until he disappears completely. He doesn't walk off screen. He doesn't duck into a building. He just vanishes mid-step. Technicians examined the footage, no corruption, no glitch. All other parts of the video were clear, crisp, unbroken. Only those few seconds with Isaac were distorted. Then came the strangest part. 1 week later, a barefoot old man walked into the town's police station. His clothes were soaked, hands trembling. His speech didn't make sense. He kept saying the same line over and over. "It's a loop. He stepped into the loop. You'll see it soon." When the officers asked who he meant, the man stared blankly and whispered, "He walked through the mirror, the greenhouse curve. He's not missing. He's still walking. You just can't see it yet." He collapsed right there in the station. No ID, no phone, no records of who he was. He was taken to a nearby hospital, and within 72 hours he was dead. Cause of death, sudden cardiac arrest. No drugs, no poison, just gone. And then, more than a year later, October 2004, an old construction crew began demolishing the greenhouse behind Miller Street. They were clearing the last interior wall when one of the workers found something strange embedded in the concrete. A shattered mirror, blackened, burned, about 6 feet tall, completely sealed inside the wall. Behind the mirror, buried in the frame, were what looked like smudges. Child-sized handprints on the inside of the glass. There was no logical explanation for how they got there. No entrance, no gaps, no light damage. Just a broken mirror sealed behind decades-old concrete with handprints pressed against it from within. The mirror was sent for analysis. It never reached the lab. The truck transporting it vanished off GPS halfway through the trip. No wreck, no debris, no crash, no witnesses. Just gone. To this day, Isaac Holloway remains missing. No suspects, no evidence, no explanation. But locals say on rainy afternoons, if you walk near the remains of the greenhouse and the storm is heavy enough, you might still see him, walking in silence, forever stuck in the moment the rain began. If you want more real stories that bend reality and chill the spine, hit subscribe.